Greetings and welcome to the Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team video. Today I'm going over my quarterly tier list for the game. But before we get into things, please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video if you found it useful and helpful. Remember, I've got a discount code at Element Games, a discount code on affiliate link at Crossfire Games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. So yeah, let's get on with the tier list. So, I'm back doing my quarterly tier list. This one I've left a little bit more time, and I'll be going through the tiers, as always, based on tournament stats, my own experience, as well as chatting to other players. So going through the tiers quickly, S tier are like the best factions in the game. They are very likely to win an event, or just really likely to basically go at least like maximum 1 loss and at least 3 wins. Then you've got A tier teams. They're more likely to go 3-1, but they can still win events. They're quite good. The only thing is they usually lose to the S tiers, but still dominate the rest of the meta. Then you have the B tier teams that are more likely to go 3-1/2-2. They're still really solid, but they're more like the most balanced version of teams, You kind of all want to be in the B tier. Then C tier is just below B tier, more likely to go 2-2, but could also go 1 win and 3 losses. They are just underperforming, not in a great space. And then you have D tier, which are the worst of the worst. Very likely to lose all your games, just not in a good spot, really weak, and definitely need some kind of buff. So those are the tiers. I remember the tiers are for fun. It's all organized in a way that is just like randomly placed. There's no power within the tiers. It's not like strongest to weakest or weakest to strongest. It's more of a guide to help you kind of realize if you're, trying to look at what teams you want to take to an event, or teams you want to practice against, teams you need to look out for, that kind of thing. Obviously, if you're more dedicated to a faction, and you've been playing them more, obviously you'll be more experienced, and a single tier won't really matter. But it's just a nice little learning tool. So looking at the last tier list, so this is for the last quarter, for quarter 2. In the D tier with Hunterclade, Breachers and Vespid. C tier was Starstriders, Kazakin, Initiates and Scout Squad. B tier was Blooded, Deathcore, Exaction, Fast Talker, Kimbank, Gallowpox Infected, Hyrotech Circle, Hand of the Archon, Jaegers, Commandos, Mandrakes, Pathfinders, Tempestus Equivalents, Wormblades, Wreckers, and Ratlings. And then in A tier was Angels of Death, Nemesis Claw, Phobos Strike Team, Brood Brothers, Blades of Gain, Corsair, Felgor, Halfkin, Inquisitor Agents, Void Dancer Troop. And then the S tier was Sanctifiers, Goremongers, Chaos Cult, Legionary, Warp Coven, and Plague Marines. So that was kind of based on the meta before. Obviously, I was a bit wrong about Hyrotech Circle. I thought they're more of A tier, but in general they would be B, and they ended up being basically S tier. But generally, that was pretty solid. So that's out of the way. Now let's look at the current tier list. So starting off in D tier, we only have 2 teams. So the first one is the Lucidian Starstriders. Now, they are actually not a bad team. The issue is the meta is just absolutely horrible for them. They are primarily a shooting team. They have 2 melee operatives, but they really just don't do well in this meta. At least we're tough for them, and at least getting better, worse is good for them. But with the teams, with the recent Balance Dataslate not really changing the meta too much, Starstriders are just in a horrible spot. They're a fixed team, and they're not bad. It's just literally everyone else around them. Dedicated melee teams are a big problem for them, especially teams like Felgor. But it's just not a great time to be a Starstrider player, unfortunately. And then you got Kazakin. Kazakin are just really bad, and what made them worse actually was the fact that Games Workshop increased Tempestus Aquilans to 11 operatives, because they're effectively the same teams, with Aquilans being slightly better before when they were equal. Now the fact that Aquilans are 11 operatives, you should always be playing Aquilans. There's no reason to play Kazakin from a competitive standpoint unless you just enjoy the faction, which is really a shame. It's a shame because they're quite interesting. One thing I could definitely like to see with Kazakin is if they could shoot twice with all las/hotshot weaponry. I think that would be really cool, especially with their comms. But they are, as I said, you either run them as Aquilans or you run them Inquisitor Agents. They're just in a horrible spot. Then going into C tier, we have Angels of Death. They are the worst elite team. They're still very good. They're probably top or tied for top of C tier. The fact, Jeweler needed to be nerfed, no one disagreed with that, but they lost too much. The fact that the Sergeants were nerfed for no real reason is just bizarre. So you always take the Captain now. And, the Heavy Intercessor is 5-inch movement, which is fine. But that's more probably because that's how it is in Death Watch. They definitely needed some kind of buff. They were already underperforming for the last quarter. They just basically got heavily nerfed. So I don't see them doing any better whatsoever. Then you've got Exaction Squad. Exaction Squad are all right, but they still struggle into Elites. And even though Elites have been made weaker, doesn't really change how that matchup plays. And the other top tier teams just dismantle them. They also got hurt by the change with how like punishing and severe works, because they have a faction ability that gives punishing, and then they have an operative that grants severe. So I'm glad that synergy was killed for no reason. That's great. So on Exaction Squad, despite being this like really useful tech team, still suffer in general. Then you got Fast Talker Kinban. The problem with Fast Talker Kinban, where do I start? It's Elites, and then also you've got like stuff like Sanctifiers and Hierotech. I have no idea how they're supposed to beat those teams, especially Sanctifiers, even Goremongers. Fast Talker Kinban are an utterly like bizarre team. They're very, very good, but literally walled by so many meta teams. It's really, really depressing. I was thinking like after this slate they were going to be like top tier finally, but no, they're still fun to play, but just get dominated. Hand of the Archon, they are doing very badly just overall. They've never really recovered after stimulated sensors got destroyed from going from seatless to balanced, and they just really needed that back. The fact they haven't gotten it, and they were just underperforming for the last 3 months, makes them unfortunately the worst Eldari team. They are just kind of too honest in a way, and it's just, they're not that great. It's really depressing. Then you've got Harnkin Jaegers. I was actually contemplating putting them in D tier, but I think they're a C tier team, right? They fit in the C tier well. They still struggle with their TAC ops, but TAC ops are changing probably next month, right? And they're just like, they have the same problems as Fast Talker Kinban. Like, how do they beat Sanctifiers? Like, literally, I would like Harnkin Jaegers to get another resourceful point. I think they're almost there. It's just the meta around them. And hopefully when the next approved ops season comes around, maybe they get better TAC ops. But it's just not great to be a Jaeger player at the moment. Novitiates are in the same weird issue. Now, they do have play, and they can still be played quite well in skilled hands. But, you know, they're just an odd team at the moment. There's a lot of walls around them. The good thing is with their Acts of Faith, they get around the severe nerf because they don't have severe. They only have severe in implications only. So that gets around the like dice retaining issue, which is just weird. But they are struggling from being a 7 wound team mostly with like a 9 wound team leader. I think they could probably go up to 8 wounds. You know, that's how Games Workshop been fixing these teams. But Novitiates are just in a weird spot. Then Scout Squad, they're also very solid, but the problem is Elites are better than them, and they're just kind of like worse Elites and less flexible. Now, the forward scouting is still really powerful. I would like them to go up to 7 forward scouting options. Being at 6 is still nice, but they're like always, I'm always warned, like people tell me, oh yeah, Scout Squad can be terrifying, and I'm like, they were terrifying when they had chainsaw knives. Now the fact they're just solid is fine. Like, they just sit in the C tier. They're just okay. Then you've got Vespid Stingwings. So Vespid, I think they don't belong in the D tier. I actually was putting them in the B tier for the longest. Then I realized they are really bad on Gallodark. The doors slow them down so much. And the fact that it's a very common kill zone and is going to be continued next season with like Tomb World means they just at the moment sit at C tier. I would like 1 or 2 nice quality of life buffs of them. They are very fun to play, and on Vocus they're great, but they don't like the spread of missions, and TAC ops still aren't the best for them, so this might change with approved ops 2025. But for now, I think they're solid C tier, probably top of C tier tied with Angels of Death. And then you have Ratlings. So Ratlings I was heavily considering putting in D tier, but they did quite well in July, which kind of it brings them up in my opinion. They actually prefer Elites being around because, you know, they can just like shoot Elites to death with all their sniper rifles. They can still select free Ogrins and or Bulgarins, so, you know, that's still going for them. But the problem is their height. That's really problematic for Volcus. They're great on Gallodark, especially Games Workshop Gallodark maps, but they've just been struggling. And when you've got more Horde teams rising, they just actually don't trade in that well. The reason they like Elite so much is because they activate them, can just like pepper them with sniper rifles. They still have like the nice tripwires, but it's weird. They're in another situation where if you buff them too much, they break the game. But at the moment, they're kind of held back by being so short. So I think C tier, because it's the closest thing to sounding to short without putting them in S tier, is a good fit for Ratlings. Then going into the B tier, starting off we have Blooded for B, Blooded are balanced. No real change. They've been forever in B tier, so they just kind of fit nicely. Deathcore in B tier, they're solid as well. They're not as flexible as Blooded in terms of like their melee and close combat, but they have enough shooting threats. They never really cared about the accurate nerf because they just run accurate and ceaseless everywhere. They're still a very solid team, a bit honest. I would like them to be immune to their own gas bombardment with, you know, their gas masks. But their Deathcore are still a solid team. Felgor Ravager, I think are in B tier. You could argue that maybe they're in A tier. The issue is there's a very prominent team that you all know who I'm talking about who does their job that but better. And it's not like Frenzy's got a more balance. It's just the meta's in such a flux at the moment that Felgor are just in a weird spot. But they do like that Elite got hurt overall. They are a very good team, but as I said, there's just one team that does their job but way better. But they're really good at the moment. Definitely at least top of B tier / almost into A tier. Then you've got Halfkin Salvagers. For a while, I was going to put them in C tier, but I think they're still a B tier team. They were A tier before the Balance Dataslate. The fact that their accurate one guns just don't really work with grudge tokens just sucks. So at the moment, Halfkin Salvagers are just in B tier. They're still very solid. And, you know, with writ of claim, you know, maybe the reason it wasn't changed was because of the initiative changes coming in the new season. So for now, I think B tier is still solid. They are a very good shooting team with some melee potential. They are very solid. They do prefer seeing more elites. So the fact elites are getting a bit weaker isn't great for them, considering the rise of the other teams that are becoming more popular. But they're still in a solid spot nonetheless. Then you've got Hunterclade. They are in B tier. I think they're too strong for C tier, but they're just barely in B tier. They have a nice flex into 8 and 10 wound teams via their Firefight ploy, because now it doesn't take any damage. They can, if they're on the aggressor protocol, I believe, the melee one, they can resolve 2 strikes for a CP, right? So they can just do that. Well, they can do that for free without taking any damage once per turning point. So you can all of a sudden just pump 8 damage into someone, or 10 damage if you've like a crit hit, which is really useful, especially if your Rustalkers are double fighting. But at the moment, with how their faction rule still was like horrible for them, I think B tier is where they situate. They've got a nice kill team composition now, but if they just fix their, you know, doctriners like Doctrine Imperatives not being bad the first time you use them for everyone, they'd go back up into A. But they are also a very expensive team to collect, so I think B tier is fine for them. Legionario and B tier, they're just in a really weird spot. They lost their drive-by short-range close shooting, so just going to balanced isn't as abusable as it was when it was ceaseless. But the real big change is the fact that anti-injury ploy is now locked to Nurgle, which really sucks. It is funny now how they just can generally just negate piercing 1, which is weird unless you've got crits. So they are still a solid team, and it's more the fact that their raw operative stats are still carrying them more than their faction rules. They've still got really good faction rules, but the fact they can't one-hit 8-wound teams anymore is really problematic. They're probably like top of B as well, but I think B tier is the most situational, like best place for Legionnaire at the moment. So they've dropped quite down, at least from S tier to A tier. To B tier. Then you've got Mandrakes in B tier. They feel about the same there. Elites getting easier is nice for them, but the teams that are popular at the moment are still rough. Infiltration is good for them at the moment with Gather Surveillance, but that could change. They're still a very like tricksy team, very difficult to play, but can be quite rewarding. But there are a lot of teams at the moment that kind of check them a lot. They do like the Eldari matchup, but it's just interesting. I think Mandrakes situate in this nice B spot. And yeah, they're still solid. Oddly, they're quite good in Tyrotech Circle because of how their Soul Strike shooting works, but they're still good. Then you got Nemesis Claw crashing down from A tier to B tier. They did not like the set of nerfs they got. The fact that Prescience tokens no longer stack every turning point is just huge. Like the fact that, you know, in Midnight Clad got easier to negate, your strategy ploy Runaway got worse. Those are all like manageable. It's the fact that your prescience tokens are now just completely unreliable, which is a big part of their game plan. You've still got Vox Scream, which is great, and you can do some great like close combat damage, and they are still elites. But I think B tier is a good place for them now, especially with how their tac ops aren't great. But as I keep saying, tac ops are changing. But for now, I think B is solid for them. Pathfinders go down from A to B tier. I think B tier is a good fit for them. The only thing I would like is just that their fusion grenade being heavy reposition, but that's just parity to all other super grenades. Otherwise, they're still really solid. They are less abusable turning point 1, But the cool thing is, you know, they've still kept the marker light. So with 2 marker lights, they get +1 to hit and a reroll and ignore cover with saturate. They're still very, very threatening. They still are completely walled by melee teams like Felgor and Goremongers completely mess up Pathfinders, which I think is kind of fine. A melee, like having hyper aggressive melee teams shut down Pathfinders is kind of okay, and they still struggle a bit on Gallowdark. I would like them to get the ability to go on guard and Markerlight from Conceal again. That would be really nice. But Pathfinders are still solid in B tier. Then you got Wormblade. They're completely fine in B tier as well. Very respectable team. They still rely on their cult agents, so they can be a bit difficult to play, especially as they're all capped at 2 APL, but no real change there. Then Commandos sit in B again. I did think about putting them in C tier, and then I moved them up. They still have a lot of stun. They're solid, so by a win rate, they are not doing well at all, right? They are quite bad. But I think as the raw team, they're still solid, and with a lot of the elite nerfs, it's more playable for them in terms of the meta. So I think B tier is fine. And then Wreckers in B tier. Now, I think Wreckers are completely fine. Like, the main thing I would like for Wreckers is the fact that if they could get +1 APL from charging, that would just fix all their issues, really. Like, even ignoring tweaking engine oil, just letting them get +1 APL from being able to do a charge action, that would fix so much for the team. Otherwise, they're actually potentially good, like, anti-meta Sharks, because all their shooting is effectively 6 dice. They have crazy damage output in close combat, like the Tank Hammer doing 2d6 damage, you know, plus is very reliable at just like getting through a lot of these teams with damage negation because it bypasses damage negation. They are just completely unreliable. Like you can't predict them to do anything fixed apart from the melee operatives, which I think fits the Orc way really well, which is why I've put them with Commandos and B tier. But I do think they're quite solid. Like I am tempted playing them, but they don't do their TAC ops too well. But TAC ops are changing. But I think Wrecker Crew where they are at B tier is fine. Even at the stats, like they're really well represented and they've been hitting a 50% pretty much like consistently. So maybe they're perfectly balanced where they are. They just hate stun grenades and anything that reduces their APL. Going into the A tier, we start off with Brood Brothers. Brood Brothers in A tier. They haven't really changed too much. I think if they didn't get any nerfs, they'd definitely be in S tier. The main power for them is that Magus can still give -1 APL to visible operatives and can still Mind Blast, but now they have to select which buff they want per turning point, which causes the player to think more and makes the mirror matchup very funny. The Primus also got nerfed, but I believe that's because of the changes to initiative going forward, which are very wild. But Brood Brothers are still a very solid team. The Patriarch just kind of exists to do something on Gallowdark, but otherwise they're still very flexible, they're still very tricksy. They are quite, like, erratic because they still hit on 4s even with all the rerolls they get. They have some dice fixing ability, but at the moment I think they're a solid A tier team. Blades of Cain remain in A tier as well. I know some people have put them in S tier. They have been overperforming for the last 3 months, but it's only slightly, and I think they're just a very flexible team. Now, while they have been doing well from the stats, they haven't really won much, and they are, as I said, incredibly flexible, allowing to, based on operative selection, pick which TAC ops you want. They have a lot of tools, but all this flexibility means they have like more chances for failure. And while I think, you know, they're very good positioned in the meta, it's not the easiest team to win events with, because in the one matchup you make the wrong operative selection, it can kind of all fall apart very quickly. And I still think they're quite honest being 8 operatives, but at the moment they're still a really solid choice to pick. Chaos Cult remain in A tier. They do not like the jump change. The jump change is the biggest hurt to them. They also do not like the change to accurate, because with accurate 2, they will not change those retained dice to crits if they roll a single crit when they fight due to rending. They're like one of their mutations, Sinew got nerfed, so they're a bit worse. Oh, like the Barbed one got nerfed. So they're a bit worse when they like get outnumbered, but they're still a solid team and have this great turning point 3/turning point 4 ramp, which is very good when you play it correctly. As I said, the biggest thing for them is that they can no longer do parkour, but they're still a very powerful team overall. Corsair Voidsguard, they remain in A tier for me. They are, oddly, I think the last team that has a turning point 1 alpha strike, because if you forward scout someone, then you dash that operative and they're within range of your Psyker, you can like warp jump someone and then have them reposition dash shoot. But they're still a very tricksy team. They have 2 piercing 2 weapons, they destroy elites better, they have power weapons everywhere, they have good TAC ops. Corsair Voice Guard are amazing. They've got punishing, balanced, so many tools. They are a very, very powerful team. They are actually not too great into hordes, oddly. Like Blades of Cain are a bit better at that because they have more native ways to like double fight, double shoot. So, or like charge fight shoot. So they have more ways to like get rid of multiple operatives at once. But Corsair are still a very powerful team. Galapox Infected are all the way up into A tier. Now they didn't get any buffs, but what was important was we saw like the change to Plague Marines. So with Contagion. So Galapox are effectively the best anti-meta melee team. Because when you're in close combat with the Hulks, you count as being injured. We're super injured, so you're -1 to hit. So because basically they're a melee team and the only way to deal with them is being in melee with them, they actually oddly counter a lot of the melee teams. And they still have a lot of way to push up the board. Like they're okay at the tac ops, but because elites got worse, it's actually easier for them to play. They even like fighting into hordes because especially once they get their tentacle monster into combat, he just lives the entire game doing charge fight charge. If you've got barge, they are slower, but now the elites are worse and like a lot of the melee counters have like gotten worse as well. They do well into a lot of the melee teams and just be a consistent threat. So they're actually really good, especially as they're approaching the end of their lifespan, at least competitively due to declassification. Then you've got Imperial Navy Breaches in A tier. They go up to A tier because they've got +1 wounds, not via stims, and the fact that Brace still triggers from 3 or more damage. Now, because of this, they actually have way too many wounds, and what a lot of people also miss is Brace triggers on the Skull and Cat, because Games Workshop didn't realize that Brace would also affect all those operatives. So the interesting thing is you have a Skull that's also -1 damage if you do 3 or more damage to a minimum of 2, but they have lots of tricks. They are quite limited in what they can do, and once they've kind of thrown their Skull nuke, they kind of don't have much play. But that Guy Skull is going to be very annoying because it's effectively going to charge around like 14-16 inches, then blow up. The fact it went to lethal 4-up was probably a bit too much, but the other issue with Breaches is their poor damage output. They are really tanky, but they don't have many ways to capitalize on it outside of like basically just, you know, hoping how their Grenadier and Melter rolls well, but their Melter and Plasma all hits on 4s, even their Chain Fist hits on 4s. Blitz got nerfed indirectly with like with Close Assault because the Severe won't trigger Punishing, so they're a bit worse in that regards. But they're a very, very tanky team that will basically always be a 12 operative team, like 12 activations, because you're going to take the Skull and the Cat. It's a very tricksy team that's going to be quite annoying, but it can also be annoying to play because all you can do is just kind of sit in your territory, like dash up, which would be very annoying to deal with, but they're in a good spot at the moment. Phobos Strike Team remain in A tier. They're very solid. The issue is they probably would have gone to S tier if they didn't get Deadly Shots nerfed, so the Deadly Shots is no rerolls within 6. You have to be more than 6 from the target, which means you're less reliable rushing down the opponent, but now if the opponent's rushing you down, you don't get those rerolls. So it's actually a very nice way to balance that team. They still have amazing shooting. They've got the marksman. Most of their operatives can ignore obscurity or have lethal 5-up shooting. They're still very tricksy, good at scoring tac ops. A solid team, really, really good, but that deadly shot change is quite big. Then you've got Tempest's Aquilans. They really shouldn't be 11 operatives, but they are amazing right now. So keep enjoying the 11 operatives while it lasts. They are actually borderline overperforming / dominating from the podium side, which means maybe it might just be for 3 more months, but they're definitely A tier. They have a lot of tricks. You effectively only get 2 turns to play against them because turning point 1 and 2, you just have to run away from them. Then 3 and 4, you kind of just have to push the hardest. But Aquilans are a very flexible and powerful team that can oddly be quite defensive. Like they have oddly quite a lot of shooting defenses because when they drop down to the end of your opponent's next activation, they count as being obscured. They have a lot of tricks and they're a very good team. So definitely belong in the A tier. Void Dancer Troop remain in the A tier because, yeah, they still climb for 2. They're fast. They got a lot of tricks. They've got powerful ploys. The fact that their blades have severe is kind of very, very good. They're just this really fast Eldari team. Now, while they're not as good as Blades of Cain, they're still a very solid team. They're reaching the end of their yassification time, so soon they will be declassified. But, you know, they're just a solid team at the moment. they have their flaws, but they're more honest than a lot of teams and more honest than they've been like for ages. Then you've got Warp Covenant A tier. I've taken them out of S tier because their shooting is no longer as consistent as it used to be, and the sorcerers are no longer like melee monsters. The fact they're no longer 5 attacks and also just 4 attacks and balanced is a huge change, because they were usually 5 attacks with lots of rerolls or dice fixing. Now they're just 4 dice and they don't get any benefit with Brotherhood of Sorcerers because that's just balanced as well, and their Kopeshes are balanced. They can still be very powerful because they can flex between Marines and lots of Zangors and take like, it all go like very elite. So they're still powerful in that regard. They have a lot of shooting, but because it's no longer ceaseless, they have to be more respectful, and they just are a little bit less tricksy. They're probably slightly still too good, but we'll see how they go. I think they're safely at least in A tier for now. Plague Marines are also down into A tier, and that's mainly with the Contagion nerf. So now Contagion only triggers if you have a poison token or if you're within 3 inches of their icon. This hugely changes how the team plays. Now, I know when I was chatting to like Orion, me and him were basically playing the team how you should be playing them now, where we've been very aggressive of doling out poison tokens. So if you were already doing that, you will see no change. But if you were kind of doing what most of the player base were doing, which was just kind of, you will eventually get poison tokens, charge me, and let's play this your -1 to hit gamble. So you really do have to invest in giving poison tokens out early, especially turning point 1, which is going to be very difficult for players. But regardless, they're still a very powerful team, lots of powerful ploys, operatives, damage negation. For me, they're still in A tier. They're a great team, but you do have to be very proactive with your poison tokens, which is good in my opinion. Then we have Raveners in A tier. So I was heavily considering putting them in S tier, but then I realized, they are being like, they look like they're going to be a problem in the stats like going forwards. They are very popular, and they do have a very their most successful way to play Raveners is basically to not play the game. So you basically hide in your tunnels until turning point 3/4. You get, send 1 out at turning point for implant, and then just run away. You just run away and tie on the crit op, win on the kill op, and then massively win on the tack op. It's fine. It's not fine. They use implant, but the thing is, literally implant is going in a month. So that I can't put them in S tier for that playstyle, because that playstyle massively hinges on implant, which is likely being removed. And the thing is, I still think it has counterplay. Raveners are a very problematic team. They do have, the thing is, them being 20 wounds is fine. It's the fact they have constant healing every time they activate. If Games Workshop didn't give them healing, it would have been fine. So A tier is good for them. Their problem is they still lose to security and teams activate them. So if you can just passively outscore them, you can force the Ravener players to commit. And if you stay away from their tunnels, they have no special rules. But because of their raw stats and ability to generate constant command points with no real downside because of their constant healing, they definitely sit in A tier for me. They do like the fact that other elites got nerfed because elites were a big counter for them, and they also do well into other melee teams, especially Goremongers, and they love the Contagion nerf. That's really good for them. Oddly, they are really terrified of security teams and Gellerpox, especially Gellerpox. Otherwise, Raveners are in a good spot. Then I've put Battleclade in A tier. Now, they didn't do too well last month, but overall, they've been doing pretty well. I think they're a very tricksy team who effectively destroy any team they out-activate, sans Raveners. Raveners are just tough for them because Raveners are too fast, but Battleclade have so many tricks. Network Counteract is so powerful. I've been playing against some really good Battleclade players, and they really tempted me to try and switch to the team. They're effectively a more up-to-date version of Elucidine and Starstriders, but Network Counteract is so powerful. The fact you could have your Melter Gun shoot, then you can have next activation, someone shoot, and the Network Counteract have your Melter shoot again. Really, really crazy. They do not like the change that they can't, after going on guard and perform a guard action, can't counteract again because it messes up Network Counteract. But they are still really, really good. I think as the game goes on, they have a solid selection of TAC-op archetypes. I think they're only going to get better, especially for now, Raveners are a bit better than them. But I think once people the game changes, we go into Approved Ops 2025, I think Battleclade are going to be in a really good spot. They don't like being rushed down with melee, but they're still quite formidable. Everyone minimum 8 wounds for up save. they're great. Their melee isn't the best, but also isn't the worst either with enough equipment. So very, very interesting team overall. Going into the S tier, we have Hyrotech Circle up from B to S. Now, they did get nerfed a bit. They can't teleport Turning Point 1, but they can still teleport with the Chronomancer into and out of control range, all that kind of jazz. Nothing else really was touched on the Chronomancer apart from, you know, their ability to to coordinate, to do the one action like fight or stuff. So they can't do that on counteract. The issue is, once again, with the kill op, the fact they still abuse the kill op means in terms of the kill op, they are generally always going to be one kill grade higher than you, which means that's a 2 victory point swing, and going to a minimum 2 victory point swing into most games automatically is very unfair. I wish the devs would realize that's a problem. But the issue is because people go, oh, they still die, but a smart Hyrotech player will only feed you maybe one operative a turning point, which will come back. So you're like that by then, they're on kill grade 3 and you've gone back to kill grade 1. So that's like a 4-point swing to them, which is crazy. Well, 3-point swing, but it's 3 or 4, which is still enough to like win the game. So Hyrotech Circle remain incredibly powerful, great selection attack ops, great operatives. They didn't really lose anything. They just have to respect more teams Turning Point 1, and they were mostly teleporting against teams they out-activated, i.e. Elites, which they already beat and now beat harder. So Hyrotech, amazing. Like, they're in a great spot. Then we have Sanctifiers. Sanctifiers are still S tier. Yes, their Sermon got a bit worse by being a 3-inch range, but you can still have your roaming missionaries, like Jaws. So because if they have holy relics, they always count as being under the sermon, so they can just run around the flanks. And then you've got preachers who will still be under the sermon while on objectives, because they refuse to lead the procession be within 6 inches of the leader. Like, the reduced range is still very powerful. Any free movement in kill team is incredibly powerful, and the fact they can do it every turning point from Turning Point 2 and then have a strategy ploy that lets them do more repositioning is insane. This team is still too fast. Blaze tokens are worse now, but Hand Flamer should have been 2/2 damage. The fact they do the same amount of damage as a normal Flamer isn't great. And the other thing is, they still are very accurate with Ceaseless and their damage negation. Damage negation is the biggest issue. The fact they do to a minimum of 2, and it makes them all like 10 wound operatives at least. Your leader can still shut down operatives. He's a Space Marine, effectively. He's 5/5 damage. You've got the Null Skull, which shuts down other +1 APL modifiers. So you've got which oddly didn't get reduced. All other teams that could mess up APL had their range reduced in that way, except for Sanctifiers. So if you are a Sanctifier player, you are literally having a great time. Now, it may not survive until the next Balance Dataslate, but we've been saying this for 4 months now. So I think at this point, Sanctifiers are probably just going to sit where they are, at least unless the Games Workshop devs actually change their mind when they don't want Sanctifiers dominating the game. But if you're a Sanctifier player, they're a great spot. They wall so many teams, like Eldari teams, really struggle into Sanctifiers, as well as other hordes. Elites were your biggest issue, and they got nerfed way more than Sanctifiers did. So Sanctifiers are still great into Elites now. The only thing they really worry about is Hyrotech. And oddly, when I've been speaking to Hyrotech players, they're either the mindset that they beat Sanctifiers or lose to Sanctifiers. So if you were going for top 2 teams, I'd probably say Hyrotech and Sanctifiers probably equal at the moment. Then Goremongers go up into S tier. The reason they've gone up into S tier is they did get nerfed, but only slightly. So their leader just has a normal Just a Scratch. And, their healing did get reduced to D3+1 instead of 2D3. But they still, their melee damage negation has no limit. So it triggers every time they fight. And it's to a minimum. It's no minimum. So even the biggest thing is I like Runes of Khorne. So when they shot, they go down to 2 wounds. But then if you're 2 free damage and you charge into them, going oh well, I might as well charge you. I've got 3 attacks hitting on 4s. If you don't roll a crit, you do 1 damage and then you die to the Goremonger, which is just insane. They wall so many horde teams and they prey on so many horde teams. They actually are a natural predator of Sanctifiers. It's really quite insane. And the fact that Elites got nerfed makes it even better for them, because Goremonger's biggest issue were Elites. Elites just walking up and double tapping them. Now they don't have to worry about Elites so much. Remember, they're really good intel Eldari teams, other shooty horde teams, which are going to rise in prevalence, and even other melee teams. The only melee team they really are terrified of is Galapox. And they have great tac ops, great ways to burst damage, powerful ploys, ability to do lots of things on counteract. And if you've seen like teams with really that can do stuff on counteracts are generally very powerful, because for example they can spend a CP to switch to engage and then charge from counteract, which means you can hide, and then if someone gets within 2, if they can't kill you in one shoot action, you can then charge them. You can still charge in the strat phase. They still have so many powerful combos going off. Like they didn't tone down the insight to like generating bleeding tokens, which gives you so many gore tanks. If gore tanks were harder to generate as well, where at the moment they're very easy, like, you know, the team's great. And you've got a Sangue Vitae. So easily S tier for me. I was originally going to put Raveners in S tier or above, like Goremongers. So you do have to respect Raveners and Galapox, but I think they do so well into the rest of the meta. They wall and gatekeep so many teams like Sanctifiers. They have great tac ops and they can score them reliably. I think they're easily S tier. And even when you're looking from the stats, they've been doing very well. They're an incredibly popular team. And while their win rate's just been under 55%, they've actually been dominating tournaments and events. So they are a very successful team to run. Then finally in S tier, we've got Inquisitor Agents. Now they actually saw no buffs whatsoever. They did get side buffs. So basically, because Breach has got +1 wounds instead of their +1 wound being tied to their equipment, now they're 8 wounds in Inquisitor Agents, which means they are another viable option for Inquisitor Agents. You still have Absolute Authority, you still have Ceaseless, you still have so many powerful abilities and operatives, right? So you have so many tools that you can select whatever tac op you want each game. The biggest issue is like selecting the right combination of auxiliary operatives, but they're incredibly powerful. The fact you can also still bring a suitcase worth of kill teams to your games is very good. And with elites getting worse, that's very good for Inquisitor Agents, because they were actually a team that really hated elites. They did prey on elites well, but elites also had a good way to aggressively push into Inquisitor Agents. Now they can't do that as consistently. Inquisitorial Agents are an amazing spot. They're probably the weakest team in S tier. Goremongers are still difficult for them, but you have your Pistolier who can shoot twice. And when you do Absolute Authority to turn off like melee negation, you can do crazy thing with their melee ploys, melee operatives. But Inquisitor Agents have so many tools, so many like ways to shut down other teams in ways you can't expect. Because a lot of teams are designed with their flavor now being tied to their ploys, being able to do key things with their ploys. And the fact as the Inquisitor Agent player, you can stop them doing that once per turning point is incredibly powerful. And you obviously have to make sure you do it at the right time. But once you're playing this team like top level, you will shut down nearly everyone you play. They are very hard to play at the moment, but I think they're so good. You still probably go Kazakin all the time, but then you're now flexing more into Exaction and Breaches, because, you know, you only really cared about piercing 2 because of so many elites. With elites becoming less common, Breaches actually get better as an option, because with their Grenadier, you get more cracks. It does count towards your piercing limit, but you don't care, because if you're just fighting into Horde, you only really need piercing 1. You don't care too much about the loss of the melter gun. So they're a very flexible and powerful team. And, you know, while they haven't been doing too well in general, when we get to more competitive formats, Inquisitor Agents have been doing a lot better. So I think S tier is a good fit for them at the moment, especially with how the meta is shaping up at the moment. So for the tier list overview, we've had a lot of changes. Starstriders have crashed down to be one of the worst teams in the game, and the S tier hasn't changed too much. Hyrotech Circle are an S tier, but they kind of always have been, you know, since just near the halfway through of the last meta. And, you know, Sanctifiers still S tier, Sanctifiers for S tier because they're S. Goremongers go up to S tier because of the change to elites, and then you've got Inquisitor Agents back in S tier. Otherwise, you know, we actually do have less teams in the A tier, but more teams in the B tier, and a lot more teams in the C tier. It's like the issue when you come to the D tier is kind of like Kazakin and Starstriders have kind of been replaced. Starstriders are kind of being replaced by Battleclade, who are just oddly a better version of them, with more like you lose the space laser for double firing everyone, like everyone just double fires. And Kazakin, just play Tempestus Equivalent or Inquisitor Agent, just play those teams. The elites getting worse was good, but the problem is because with the last Balance Dataslate, effectively only elites got worse and there were no other buffs. We haven't seen a big enough change to the meta, because that's why you're still seeing Sanctifiers and Hyrotech up top, as well as Goremongers, because they gatekeep so many of the other factions, especially Horde teams. Horde teams are going to still struggle. They do well into elites, as you can see, but I don't know how a lot of the Horde teams are supposed to beat Hyrotech, but more so Sanctifiers and Goremongers. Raveners are still in a really good spot, and if you wanted to, you could argue they're an S tier, but they are very popular, and the issue is their runaway implant playstyle is strong, but it's literally got about like 4 weeks left, maybe. And, you know, there is more success from them when you do play Rushdown. It's a bit more gambly, but the main success is just running away. But I think people need to learn to play that more. It is still a problem, but there is like a lot of the meta teams have ways to reliably score, like security and recon, which means while Raveners are great, they still have huge flaws, especially when playing the crit op. But we haven't seen too much of a change. Like Imperial Navy breaches have shot up to A tier. They're going to be a real problem, like just because of their durability and the fact they can nuke people with the skull. But the other issue breaches of players are going to have to realize that their threat range is very limited. And if you commit your gunners and they flop, they're just going to die, because they will likely lose the effective brace, especially if they're pushing into the enemy. But Tempestus Aquilans will definitely do well this meta. They did well last meta. Plague Marines are still solid. You just have to, you know, get those poison tokens out there. Hunter Clade might see more play, but it's difficult. They are a solid team, but just with solid floor-backs, which draw them back a lot. But, you know, we could see like the rise of Eldari. Blades of Cain are in a good spot, as well as Corsair Void's Guard, and Void Dancer Trooper still solid. Once again, the caveat is we are going to get a new approved ops 2025, like hopefully in a month, which can change a lot of things, which is why I've tried to keep it where it is. For example, that's why Raveners on in S tier. But even excluding the approved ops changes, these teams feel kind of right to me where they are. They're just very static. It's nothing too heavy has changed. Like Halfkin Salvagers have gone down a tier, but that's partly effect with the, as I've repeatedly said, the change with retaining dice due to severe punishing, rending, all that kind of jazz. It's really like impacted a lot of teams in a way that it seems like maybe Games Workshop was unaware of or aware of. It's very difficult to say unless they fix stuff. But yeah, you know, am I looking forward to this meta? No. Am I hoping for an emergency balance data slate? That won't happen. Yes. But it's weird, right? The meta is very strange. Even with this tier list, while I'm like finally happy with it, it took me like 2 weeks or even 3 weeks to probably think it through. And normally I don't need to think that much. And I'm not saying like, oh, because the meta's been really easy to solve. It's just so weird when one big part of the meta has been nerfed, but one like big problems haven't really been touched, and there were no other big buffs. So it's kind of just like, as you see, the most teams I've pushed up are, which easy, are just like Breaches and Hunterclade. Gallowpox went up after I like thought and looked at them for a while, and they are very tempting for me to go back to. The issue is, you know, you've got declassification coming up soon, so all those Yassified teams, Year 1 classified teams are going. But I think when we go into that tier list, I'm probably just going to do 2 tier lists, the everything tier list, and then one for classified format. So we'll see about that. I was tempted to add onto E tier or like the F tier, Strike Force Burial, but they're not out yet, so they're safe. They're safe. I can't meme them yet. They actually do have to be released before I can meme them on the tier list. But I'm kind of happy with that, how that shaped up. Hopefully everyone remembers this is for fun, and I will have an article version of this down in the episode description below. But that's pretty much it for me today. Please remember to like and subscribe as well as comment. Let me know what you thought of today's video. Do you find it useful and helpful? What do you think of my tier list? Anything you would change? Let me know. And remember, I've got a Discord you can check out for free in the episode description below, and a affiliate Element Games, and a affiliate Discord code.crossfire games, and a Patreon if you want to give me some more support. I'm just going to quickly shout my patrons. So for my adepts of the crit, I have Trench Fever, Tom, the Houston Toads, Super Cow, Nick, Mr. Mercenary Q, Mr. Meatwad, Marshall, Lucas, Graham, Fangzoo, Draken, Dan, Dada Goldens, Chris, Alex, Amorphium, and Alexis. So thank you so much for all your support. It really means a lot to me and helps support the channel. But yeah, the videos are going to be a bit more spaced out because I am going to Nova at the end of the month, and I am furiously painting stuff. My Brood Brother team. Don't worry. I just wanted to paint up more like heavy metal standard. Well, not heavy metal standard. High standard for me, because I'm like, I haven't had much time to paint, and I just really want them painted just because I've put a lot of time into converting them. So videos are going to be spaced out, probably one a week for a while, because I keep flying to America. So I'll be at Nova, the LVO, all these fancy tournaments. We'll see how accurate that tier list is. It's for fun. Hopefully people will be happy, won't be too angry. But remember, you stay away from tier 15. And remember, no matter what happens with the tier list, you always have a chance to win, as long as you can roll a crit.